are new to this story. And Kelly Gindowski, did I get that right? Okay, is my guest today. She will be speaking at this event, so this will give you a chance to kind of know what she's like and what she has to say. So, Kelly, why did you get started with what you're doing? And tell me just a little background.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Eric. I'm really excited to be here. I got started in 2016 simply by witnessing the changes that were happening in our children's public school, where they attended at an elementary school. And some of these concerns led me to much research, which led to further research. And I was really seeing a tremendous rapid shift in our education system. What started for us was learning that our children were participating in a new program called social emotional learning. And they were apparently, according to the school, they had installed this program without parental notice or consent. And it was daily mindfulness meditation that the principal led the student body in using a large Buddhist singing bowl. And then we discovered far more, but that's how I began.
So you're in California. You're over on the coast.
Yes, I'm located in Monterey County.
Okay. So what's happening there, folks, you can count on is happening here, and probably more in the Fresno School District because they're all about being woke. In Clovis, it's probably a little more reasonable, but all of these things are happening. The state has mandated and hidden that CRT is taught. They've just renamed it. So what is the big danger of CRT?
I
Or
would
actually,
say,
let's define it first before we get there.
well, and that's important because critical race theory itself is looked at as a theory to analyze the systems and structures that would be causing a system or structure of racism. You could actually look up the definition. And so a lot of people say this is something that is only taught in at the collegiate level, in various schools at the collegiate level, and this is not a theory, they say, that could be taught to younger grades. The key to pay attention to is, at this point, is not whether or not it is taught, it is in how it is taught. Because you can take something that's at the collegiate level and introduce it to young children at their age group in a variety of ways. And it is still the same concept coming through. And that's what we're seeing. But we are seeing schools in Monterey County that are admitting that CRT is taught. And we are seeing teachers' unions advocating for CRT to be taught.
That isn't surprising. It isn't surprising. I don't see how you can take those concepts. For me, CRT boils down pretty simply. It sees race first. If you're offended, then we have to believe it no matter whether it has any basis in reality. Then it has an obligation to fix that. And what it sees first is the color of your skin. So it puts one group into the group of oppressors, and it puts another group into the group of victims, and it says we need more racism to fix this. Is that a fair summary?
That is absolutely what I'm seeing, even in the curriculum that I've obtained. There are, it is important for people to know that this is essentially a form of race Marxism or neo-Marxism, where instead of separating people by a variety of social classes, they are being separated based on things like skin color. They're being separated based on their gender and sexuality or ableism. And they're also being separated in one of the curricular materials in Salinas, California. There are 29 different identities. So for example, if you have a criminal record in that identity list, you are being oppressed by those who have a clean criminal record.
Yeah, well, again, I think I said any problem they have, they can blame on this, and then they don't have responsibility for it. It's almost like a good friend of a personal friend of ours, talks about the woke Olympics, and you win prizes by getting more and more ways that you are woke, and the more ways you identify in some different way. That could be being LGBT, being a different gender. That could be by being a criminal. It's like you get points for all those. And that's just crazy.
We're seeing this in the school system and in a variety of places, but the goal is equity, which is really important for people to understand that equity is not about equal opportunities to then work towards a goal and succeed. It is about equal outcomes. And so we're seeing that impact AP courses. We're seeing that impact grading. So for example, a teacher had contacted me and she said, Kelly, I am being pressured by the school's administration to lower academic rigor of my AP class to the bottom percentage of academic performers in the name of equity, just so that we will have equal outcomes. So they're really stepping away from meritocracy, where you work towards something, and the concern that many of these people promoting this content do not realize is that when you remove a meritocracy, what you end up getting is an aristocracy.
Well, at the top, and mediocrity everywhere else.
Correct.
What do parents ask you about CRT? Or do they start with CRT, or they say, what's going on with the schools and how do I address this? It might not even just start with CRT because they constantly hide its name.
Exactly. That is a very important question. I would say in the last several years, that is the most commonly asked question I receive, is how do I find out what is being taught in my schools? And when they ask me how to learn if critical race theory is being taught, it is also in how it is being taught and implemented, what ways. So for example, in the ethnic studies class, there are schools, like I mentioned, Salinas, where they are admitting, their curriculum specialist has actually openly admitted to the media that critical race theory is included in this, and it is included in the slides for the course. You know, like, how do you analyze this using critical race theory, for example? However, what I would say to parents is usually you meet with the curriculum director or specialist, and when it comes to CRT, which they may also be using a different phrase, culturally responsive teaching, it's important to understand those buzzwords: diversity, equity, inclusion, white privilege, white supremacy, white silence, oppressed, oppressor, privileged, hegemony. Hegemony is actually a phrase that comes from Antonio Gramsci, who traces back in history with Marxism. So it is important to be familiar with some of these different words that would signify that this traces back to CRT and this Marxian idea.
Well, you say you have kids. I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews and cousins. And having watched them grow up, they have different gifts. And every parent I've ever talked to, I say, well, wait a minute. You might love your kids equally, but they have different gifts. And if we are to go for equity, they don't get to explore those gifts. We have to work at the lowest common denominator. And that's what they're setting up for us in schools. If we don't have excellence, then we don't have the country we currently have. That is an entirely different culture. Like you said, meritocracy as opposed to let's go ahead and call socialism mediocrity. I don't think that everybody that's white has this white privilege. I would even contend to say that there are people that are of a different skin color that seem to have more privilege. I would very much say that President Obama has a lot more privilege than I've ever seen in my life, and certainly his kids do. I think what's important is the content of her character, and it's crazy to me that they're looking at this going, oh, only whites can succeed, yet Obama, President Obama, Oprah Winfrey, two of the most successful people in the country, or the most important civil rights leader that we have in this country, which would be Martin Luther King. What's up with this? Is it that they don't believe in American freedom? What is the purpose behind this? Do you know why? Is it just Marxism?
I would say, in my opinion, there is an influence that in education right now as a whole that traces back to the United Nations and UNESCO. And then very similarly to UNESCO is you influence the teachers and their unions. And then once you have captured the teachers, then you work on the county offices of education. And then once you've proceeded there, then you move towards the students. And I am seeing that because one of the biggest advocates for CRT and that kind of content, the so-called pro-CRT experts in the field, they are wanting to introduce more of that content into teacher credentialing programs. And many parents will possibly come to the conclusion that this is not severe in my district. This is not, this is just something that's fringe. But if you start looking at your board agenda, past agenda, the meeting notes, look for social emotional learning, look for diversity, equity, and inclusion, look to see what's happening with comprehensive sexuality education, and then also be attentive to these teachers' unions, their union leaders, what kind of content they provide, because I am seeing, even in teacher credentialing programs, very commonly used book for those programs right now is called Critical Race Theory, an Introduction by Richard Delgado and Jean Stefanchik. So there's things like this that really influence both teachers and then beyond that. And it's important to be aware that as some teachers will eventually retire and maybe they don't partake in some of this, it's important to be aware that the young teachers that are taking those places have likely been radicalized, and education will be continuing to change if we do not speak up.
So it sounds like there's this interconnected web that is all reaching towards this equity goal. Rather than it being just CRT, it is this interconnected web. Why do you think they make, or they use all of these different names? Does it make it easier to infiltrate? What's going on?
That's a great question. When it comes to these different names, obviously it's part of some of the content that they're teaching. And I do believe that, you know, they're thinking, some of them I think are genuinely thinking that they're doing right by their students. But what we're seeing is, I mean, as you said, there was a school board meeting video that went viral a while back where a young foster child, a girl, went to her school board meeting and she shared her story as she cried. And she had been taught some of these ideas about being privileged. And through the tears, this young white girl is talking about her experience in life up until that point. That was a very hard life that led her to then have to be placed in the foster care system. But right now, I truly believe this interconnected web, it really is influenced by the teachers union. The NEA, the National Education Association, is the largest labor union in the United States. They know they have organizing power. And the sad thing is that as we watch teachers want to close schools and not advocate for even in-person learning and those kinds of things, I personally believe that we have activists who are masquerading as teachers, and we have activists who may masquerade as journalists. So we have people who have adopted onto an ideology, and then they have decided to operate that ideology on the forefront under the guise of whatever field they're in. So instead of teaching children to enjoy the love of learning and to have a passion and joy and desire to study science and write a fictional essay, or different subjects that they can be exposed to, it is really about critical praxis, because that's the ideology driving many of these teachers. And critical praxis is tracing back to Marxism, where every single subject is promoted, is woven into it, is this ideology. So for example, singing class might become singing as activism. Pretend play at school. There are currently people promoting singing as activism in this country, and there are currently people talking about pretend play for 5 to 12-year-olds using stuffed toys as creating a toy protest. There's people who are promoting things like gardening for food justice. And what we're seeing is, in my opinion, we are seeing a ideology take over our education system, but it is robbing children of the gift of a childhood. And that is what really is appalling and needs to be stopped.
We're going to go ahead and take a break. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I am talking with Kelly Gindowski. Well, I made my Scheukoski. Well, at least I didn't quite strike out. I had on that third strike, a third swing, I got it. But so we're still on Facebook. Look, this is an important issue, folks. And if you'd like to meet this lady, coming up, you can go to California at noleftturn.usa and look at their page and see when they have upcoming events. This is really rather important. To all my Facebook fans, thank you for watching. I'm now on YouTube, and so that gives us a little bigger possibility, because not everybody wants to deal with social media. YouTube still censors, but it is a little better. So we're going to go ahead and come back. When we do, let's go ahead and talk about solutions. How do we move forward? What do we do? So let's go ahead and start again. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today I am joined by Kelly Gindowski, and she is talking about critical race theory and what's going on in today's schools. If we don't take care of education, if we don't fix what's going on, we're going to have a different world. And so it's time to get to school board meetings. It's time to let them know what you think. And potentially it's time to replace school board members. That is happening in Fresno. Might have to happen in Clovis, I hope not. So what are some of the things that, once people begin to be educated, what do we do? Where's the next step?
I think personally at this point, it is also, obviously, in addition to going to school board meetings and speaking up, when parents do that, it is so important that they know their rights, because I've seen school boards try to utilize the lack of parents being and taxpayers knowing their rights to their advantage to get them to essentially stop talking. But running for school board is something that we absolutely need, and we really need to be able to discuss this with people from all different political affiliations, because even in the midst of all of this, I am finding that parents across the board are concerned about what's happening in education. We're seeing more and more parents concerned about this issue. So that is important. The information and awareness is key. Being able to understand your rights, being able to understand the information and how to find that is important. I also think parents, it's a time to also consider other schooling options. I've asked a couple prominent people in the US about their stance with education and where they see it going. It's not going in a good direction, and it's in a very concerning place. And so, I mean, for our family, and not every family has the ability to do this, but we made a very big decision at the end of the spring 2019 to take our children out of the public school system. We currently homeschool through a charter, and that has been a wonderful experience. But I will say, it's an investment that we have made. But oh man, I can't describe how nice it's been to see all of the wonderful ways that our children have blossomed with that kind of homeschooling environment. And I was anti-homeschooling before, so I've changed.
I think the first thing we can do is kind of define what are your rights when you go to a school board meeting. You have the right to speak. You can speak on the agenda, and that's typically one sign up. You have to be there beforehand at most school boards. Some of them, as long as they have not gotten to the issue, will let you speak. Some of them you have to sign up a little earlier before the meeting actually starts. But you absolutely are guaranteed the right to speak. You have the right to film everything that's happening. You don't have to request it. You can film absolutely everything that's happening. Whether it's on Zoom, many school boards are filmed, but not all of them. But you could show up with your phone and film. That's legal. They can't stop you. You have not only the right to speak, but you have a certain amount of time. That varies with how many speakers. It's typically from 2 to 3 minutes, which is not enough. Here's a tip for people that need a larger message. If you can get a group of parents together, you can get on the agenda. If you're on the agenda, then you have more time because it's an allotted amount of time for an agenda item. Because you're divided into little 2-minute segments, what if you were to write a message and have 5 people read it? There's potentially either 10 or 15 minutes, depending on how much time you were given, to speak on one subject. There's ways to work around this. You can also have the right to request a meeting with school board members. Any other suggestions?
I think it's also really important in all of those things. Parents, the board agenda for your school board meeting should be released 72 hours in advance, and it's important to peruse those agendas, and you can look at past agendas. Sometimes schools will hold a meeting, an emergency meeting or a special meeting, and that would be an agenda they release 24 hours in advance. But I will say also important is, for example, schools may allot different time frames for each individual speaker and various subjects. They may have you register online in advance to speak in person. It is important to know that any information you provide on a public comment slip becomes public record. So if you do not want to provide your last name, you don't need to. If you do not want to provide your address or your home phone number or your email, you do not need to. You can simply state on these cards your first name, and then you can state whether it's a specific agenda item you're speaking to or a general public comment under the jurisdiction of the school board. And we had a situation in Salinas where the superintendent said that the public would no longer be permitted to speak on CRT or the ethnic studies course. Many parents left that meeting and thought that they could no longer speak. But it was important for them to realize this is your First Amendment free speech right. That is a violation of the law. And so attorneys were involved and sent a letter to the school district's attorney to correct the matter.
I know several people that have also asked to speak to the superintendent, and they met with the superintendent in a group because the way the school board is kind of arranged is you've got either 5 or 7 board members, depending on the size of the school. They kind of oversee what the superintendent does and have hiring and firing power over the superintendent. The superintendent essentially runs the school district and has hiring and firing power over everybody. Now, they can get rid of somebody in administration relatively easily, but if somebody's a teacher, because of the union, it's almost impossible for them to get rid of a teacher. But with that structure, you've got 2 different places to find out what's going on, and you might need to talk to both and find out who's actually running the ship. Because in some cases, it's a strong school board, and they hold their superintendent accountable. In other places, it's a strong superintendent, and the board just goes, what do we do? And they're kind of like, you know, those bobbin head dolls that just go, yeah, okay. So you got to find out who's steering the ship. Once you figure that out, then you need to step in and find out what's really going on. One of the great places you said is go to the superintendent of instruction. That person, or you said not instruction, curriculum.
Curriculum director or specialist, yes.
And that's the person who would know what books were in the library, you would think. Wouldn't they have had to have approved reading lists, things like that?
Well, here's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing more parents share about supplemental curricular materials. So this could be something the teacher found online, even through a webzine or a random article, and they print it out and then they teach that to the class. And it could be regarding a multitude of subjects, and that's really important for parents to find out what supplemental materials are taught, in addition to what is the approved curriculum, what slides are shown, and I want to see them in presentation mode. What kinds of question prompts come up in these slide decks, if any? What videos are shown? What websites are referred? What books are being used and recommended, or any kind of apps? I'm seeing a lot of parents here that their kids' tablets at school that they get in free time are having some of this content in there, whether it's Brain Pop or Brain Pop Junior or other programs. So those are important to be aware of as well. And then when parents meet with any school district official, especially if it's an in-person meeting or a phone call, I strongly advise keeping a paper trail. As soon as you get off the phone, perhaps take notes during your meeting. As soon as you get off, send an email so that you have that paper trail to the person, thanking them for their time. And in review, we discussed XYZ today. We asked you these questions and we look forward to your follow-up. I shared these concerns, and have that paper trail and make sure you have a record of every in-person meeting.
No, that's a tip I'd never thought of. I got to remember that because I'm fairly involved. I've found that when I want my school board members to know about something, I go to the meeting and I announce it at the meeting. It's not that I'm always talking about a subject. For instance, because I believe that these mandates for masks and the shots are kind of tyranny, and I don't believe the shots work very well. I made a point of going and inviting them to an event where they would hear a different perspective on what's happening. I often do that with government so that they can't say, oh, I didn't know about that. Here's a way to, at least you can't You can lead them to water, you just can't make them drink. So there's just kind of a tip for people. If there's something that's important, some event, let them know. I think there's nothing more powerful, though, when I listen to people speak, when they talk directly about how the school is not addressing one of their children's needs. Everybody gets that, whether you have kids or not. Everybody gets that. We all want kids to have a hand up. We all want them to have equality of opportunity. What people need to realize is if what we get is equity, all we get is the lowest common denominator. What do you think of several large school districts in California eliminating the bottom grades? No Fs, no Ds. So now a diploma means nothing.
Right. They're really working heavily on the education system, and these kinds of implementations should cause us to be very concerned about what I like to call the paper trail. Who is helping move the piece in this direction, and what activist groups are engaged? What are the teachers unions saying? What is happening at our state's capital and in the federal Department of Education? What is happening there? This equity and the implementation of that and how it's impacting grades is going to affect, exactly as you said, performance, a desire to perform, all of those things. But it's also important that we never forget history, because if you look at Stalin and Mao and other members of history, they really went for the education system first. And everybody ought to look up and research Georgy Lukács. He was a Hungarian Marxist who in 1919 first became this commissar, and as that role, he installed a more graphic sex education program. His goal was to demoralize or to de-Christianize the populace before employing Marxist ideas. And that is quite important, because here in California, it's almost as if we're watching that exact playbook occur once again. Here we had the 2016 California Healthy Youth Act become law, and then it was required for implementation in 2018. And now here we have a very concerning form of ethnic studies curriculum. Many parents don't realize the curriculum I obtained was not just through going to the school district, which many parents attempted. We had to get an attorney involved, and my attorney filed that public records request. It's called a CPRA. There's the federal version, which is a FOIA, but this is called a California Public Records Access request. And so we obtained source documents for the class. Over 1,600 pages received. We received the student curriculum. We received teacher training slides. We received emails. We received student slides for various class days. We received videos. We received all kinds of material and content. And it's very clear that it's not even just critical race theory, that there are concepts of both gender theory and queer theory woven into this, in addition to social justice theory. And there's even an activist pledge where students are encouraged to fill in the blank of a cause that they plan to be activists for. And what I see, sadly, is I see a very politically motivated group of teachers union members who have been working hard for years to promote their political achievements and get those things passed. Many people don't realize even the California Teachers Association in our state lobbies more than any other entity in our state. They hold a lot of focus on politics. And with that, now we're seeing children, in my opinion, being used as the political puppets of these teachers, to be used to promote their own political endeavors and goals. And there's a state seal of civic engagement program in California that is being rolled out already. And in those programs, they want to pre-register 16, 17-year-olds to vote. And they also encourage those students to engage with activist organizations, and they call it civic engagement. So there's a group called MICFA Challenge or a group called Generation Up. And those are just two groups of student activist organizations. And the MICFA Challenge, or not the MICFA Challenge, but the Seal of Civic Engagement program also seeks to have students go out and register voters. And this is a state where we rank low academically. This is in a district like Salinas, where kids are not reading anywhere near grade level. Kids performing mathematics where they could. Science is far behind. And so instead of equipping these students with a love of learning and a journey towards success for themselves, they're being used, in my opinion, as these political puppets, and it really needs to end.
Absolutely. Now, this is almost an overwhelming number of details for the average person. Are there some central sites where they can go? Are there some resources for parents where it's a little simpler, where they can go, oh yeah, here's the 5 things I need to figure this out. Here's some answers to questions. You have some sites and things that you can recommend?
Yeah, there's various groups and organizations. I will be providing more information on my website in the future. It is a new endeavor, a podcast episode where parents can learn from podcast episodes. That's www.atimettostand.me. And parents, if you're listening and you'd like to ask me a question, my email is info@atimettostand.me. And I would also encourage parents to seek out various groups. I mean, we have Californians for Equal Rights is a group providing wonderful resources and information. We have the Parent Union, as you mentioned, there's No Left Turn in Education, and there's many different groups appearing on the scene. I would also recommend that I understand we have great information being put out by the Heritage Foundation and Mr. Christopher Rufo. And there's also a website with lots of detailed understanding of information that's been useful to me called newdiscourses.com. And that is part of the podcast and effort of James Lindsay. I would say I probably learned the most about these topics from him. And things that he describes and explains very clearly, for example, the woke redefinition of democracy. That was something I was not aware of a couple months ago. And I listened to his episode, and it was tremendously helpful and eye-opening.
So parents aren't standing alone. We're going to go ahead and take our final break. When we come back, we're going to talk about why this can, or how this can be fixed, and why you're hopeful. Because you wouldn't be going to this much work if you didn't believe there were solutions to this problem. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. So we're still on Facebook for just a minute. Again, why are you hopeful? Why go to all this work? For me, it's because this is something special. There's a reason why everywhere around the world, people want to get to America. It's because of the freedom and opportunity. If we don't preserve that freedom and that opportunity, the world is going to lose something. And the next generation is not going to know the preciousness of freedom. So we're going to go ahead and come back. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. Today, we're talking about what's going on in our schools here in California. I am speaking with Kelly Gindowski. Probably got it wrong again. I'm on a roll with that, but Kelly's rolling with it. Kelly, why are you hopeful? Why put in all this time?
I'm hopeful because I have already seen parents gain information and stand up to protect their kids. and I'm seeing more parents research information. And I really do believe that right now, especially nationwide, as parents have watched, whether it's in Nevada or Loudoun County, Virginia, or various parts of California, or in Rhode Island, or in North Carolina, or in Tennessee, we're seeing more and more parents go to these board meetings. But it's not just parents. There are taxpayers who realize that the students are our future and they really deserve so much better. And so we're seeing that really take off. And I think I remain hopeful and I continue researching, because if people have the correct information and the facts, they're able to make determinations and decisions. Just speaking in 2019 at some school board meetings actually prompted more parents to be more attentive to the school and to the children's assignments. And as a result, in my community, I watched almost 20 students from a variety of families. Their parents pulled them out of the district that was not willing to budge in what they were doing. And yet there are other parents that are working to advocate for a better education, and they're speaking up courageously. And I admire every one of them, because it does take courage and it does take a time investment. But here's where I like to give a little example. Christmas just passed, and we likely may have bought something or prepared a meal or something, but we put some time into searching the reviews of these products. How much more time investment is important, whether it's, looking into this curriculum in your area and finding some of the things that are going on and being able to speak about it. So there's lots of things we research in this life, but what a valuable thing to research the things that are going to impact our children's mind, their heart, and their character.
Well, you're investing in their future by doing so, and everybody's future. I really think that COVID shined a light on the education system. It shined a light on government, and it showed us that they don't seem to care very much about the kids. They seem to care about their agenda, their wokeism. Because if you send a kid off to school and then that kid graduates that school, but let's say they have a 6th grade reading level, that frequently happens in the town I'm currently sitting in. What jobs can they have? You didn't equip them for the future. This is why this matters. It's not just that. It's they're spending all of this time on stuff that has to do with a political agenda rather than spending time on the basics. If you teach a kid the basics, they can then go out and figure out where they want to be politically. You teach them to think critically. I don't think it's the school's job to teach anything but basic education. They're not the parent. And this has really illustrated how they seem to believe that they're the parent, that they have all the control. And we looked at what happened in Virginia with the 2 governor candidates, and the guy who won believed in freedom. He believed that the parents actually still had some choices. And the other guy, parents shouldn't even have any say over the curriculum. That illustrates the difference in politicians. Without even naming party, I think you can figure this one out pretty quickly. We need to find candidates that stand for freedom. You mentioned that as you speak to parents, party doesn't seem to matter. So if party doesn't matter, then we need to talk to people about basic American values. How can we use those basic American values to galvanize people, to make them care? One of the hardest things as a group leader for me is getting people to show up and put in the work. How do we get them to realize that this is critical?
For me, I talk with a lot of parents, whether I'm out at the grocery store or at the park, and it's simply, hey, did you know that this is what's happening in the school? Oh no. Well, I'll send you a link so you have the evidence so that they can look and explore that. Because being able to have a site to immediately show the evidence of the claim is helpful. And I have had, I will say, since COVID especially, it's not just Republican parents that come to me. I have had an entire group of many Democrat parents who have come to me concerned about what's happening in their child's school district. And additionally, we have people who are, other, no party preference and different things like that. But libertarians included, there's people all over that are watching education and saying, this is not okay. I mean, surprisingly for me, I saw a couple episodes of Bill Maher, and I thought, what's happening to Bill Maher? Are pigs flying? Because I agree with some of the things he said about education. And people are coming to the realization that I think most people are somewhere in the middle. And those people in the middle, whatever side they've, been in politically, everybody cares about their children and they want what's best for children. And so we're seeing so many wonderful people step up. And sometimes it just takes that piece of information. Did you know that this is what's happening in math class at this school district? Did you know that the teachers union recently came out and did fill in the blank? Did you know that sex education's changed in the state? Are you aware that ethnic studies is teaching topics like Antonio Gramsci or Marxist philosophy in some schools? Those things are absolutely happening, but it is important to know exactly what is happening and have that to share with people. So that people are well informed. And then as far as getting people involved, it is concerning. I have had prominent people in the community that are afraid to speak because they think they're going to lose their job.
Okay.
My response, oh, go ahead.
So we are basically out of time. So I thank you, though we can still talk a little bit off the air. This is Eric Rollins, the Constitutionalist, here on 1550 KXEX, the best talk in town. And today it was kind of informative. I have spent quite a bit of time on CRT, but there are a lot of aspects of it. It is a multi-layered onion, and one that's rotten, and one that we need to figure out. It's time to get involved, folks. So we're still on Facebook for just a brief period of time. Are there any final thoughts?
My final thought is, if there's events, if there's parent groups, get connected and get involved. If you can get information from your school district and connect with families and different groups, do it, because right now it may be taking some courage to speak up, but the impact of speaking up now is worth preventing things from getting worse. And these are our children. Their welfare and well-being is at stake with some of the things being put in front of them. And so it is our responsibility. It is a privilege, an honor. And I also think it is a need. It is an absolute need to protect children and protect teens in our school system.
Can you give your contact information one last time so people can get a hold of you?
Absolutely. My email address is info@atimettostand.me. I can be found on anchor.fm/atimettostand. That is the podcast episodes. And then there's also the main website is www.atimettostand.me. And I would be honored to speak with your listeners and answer their questions.
Well, I thank you for sharing this time with me today. I hope we brought some light. You know, my goal is always to educate, inform, and move you to action. And I hope that Kelly helped us do that today. I thank you for your time. I appreciate your efforts. And thank you to all my fans. Good day. Enough too. And it took a while to get to the point where I went, this is important. And kind